A housemaid accepts a new job in a remote mansion and quickly senses something is wrong with the ill matriarch. While secretly investigating, she uncovers a dark poisoning scheme and a web of lies behind the family's facade. Unknowingly, her quiet courage becomes the only chance to save lives and to change her own fate. The summer sun beat down on the historic city of Bath as Josephine Stewart, 43, held her worn leather suitcase tightly as she stepped off the bus at the central station. Her tired eyes scanned the landscape of the old spa city, with its ancient architecture and cobblestone streets that told tales of England's bygone eras. "This is where my new life begins," she thought, adjusting the blue-beaded necklace her grandmother had given her before she left the small town in the Somerset countryside. After 25 years working as a housekeeper in the homes of wealthy families, Josephine had learned to read between the lines of other people's homes, to decipher secrets hidden in locked drawers and whispered conversations. The taxi driver, a grey-haired gentleman who introduced himself as Jack, whistled softly when she mentioned the address. "You're going to work at the Ashworth house? That imposing mansion on the hill." He adjusted the rearview mirror, studying her face with curiosity. "They say their fortune is old from the days of the Empire. Important people." Josephine just nodded, preferring to keep her thoughts to herself. The job had come through an agency in London, and the salary offered was almost double what she had earned in her last position. An opportunity she couldn't refuse, even if it meant moving to an unfamiliar city. As the taxi climbed the steep hill, the Ashworth mansion revealed itself in all its grandeur, a 19th-century construction with neoclassical details, wide verandas, and a meticulously cared-for garden that stretched as far as the eye could see. A manor that seemed to have stepped out of the pages of a history book. At the entrance, Josephine was greeted by Helena, the middle-aged head housekeeper with shrewd eyes that seemed to evaluate every inch of her. "Mrs. Beatrice is waiting in the drawing room. Only she and her son, Mr. Raphael, live here, along with his wife, Mrs. Christina." Helena spoke as she guided Josephine through corridors adorned with paintings of stern ancestors. "Oh, and the staff, of course. There are only a few of us now. Times have changed." Something in the housekeeper's tone made Josephine raise an eyebrow. There was a tension in the air, as if the walls of that house held secrets no one dared to mention. The drawing room was spacious, with French windows that opened onto the garden and antique furniture that was surely worth a fortune. Seated in a red velvet armchair was Mrs. Beatrice Ashworth, a lady of about 80, with white hair pinned in an elegant bun and an aristocratic posture, despite her apparent fragility. "So you are Josephine." The lady's voice was surprisingly firm. "Helena told me you have excellent references. 25 years working for traditional families in London." "Yes, ma'am." "I started very young," Josephine replied respectfully. "We have some specific rules here," Mrs. Beatrice began, but was interrupted by the sound of high heels clicking against the marble floor. An elegant woman entered the room. She appeared to be just over 35, with impeccably styled blonde hair, designer clothes, and discreet but visibly expensive jewelry. Her piercing blue eyes fixed on Josephine with an expression that wavered between curiosity and suspicion. "This is my daughter-in-law, Christina," Mrs. Beatrice introduced with a weary gesture. "My son Raphael's wife." Christina extended a hand with perfectly manicured nails, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Welcome, Josephine. I trust you'll quickly understand how things work around here." There was a veiled warning in those words. "My mother-in-law requires specific care. Her health is delicate." Josephine noticed how Mrs. Beatrice seemed to shrink slightly in her daughter-in-law's presence, as if her energy were drained by the mere proximity of the younger woman. "I personally handle my mother-in-law's diet and medications," Christina continued, her tone admitting no argument. "You will be responsible for cleaning the rooms, laundry, and general assistance. But you are not to interfere with her medical routine." "Understood?" "Perfectly, ma'am," Josephine replied, holding her gaze steady. At that moment, a tall man of about 45 entered the room. Raphael Ashworth had the same brown eyes as his mother and a kind, though worried, expression. "Ah, you must be the new staff member," he smiled, extending his hand cordially. "Welcome to our home." "Thank you, sir." Josephine shook his hand, noting the difference in temperature between Raphael's human warmth and Christina's calculated coldness. "My husband is always busy with the family business," Christina commented, sliding to his side and holding his arm possessively. "He hardly has time to worry about domestic matters. That's why I take responsibility for everything, including the health of my dear mother-in-law." There was something about the family dynamic that intrigued Josephine. As Helena led her to her quarters, the housekeeper glanced out a corridor window and saw Christina in the garden, talking animatedly on the phone, away from the family's ears. Her instinct, sharpened by years of dealing with the secrets of wealthy families, told her that something was wrong in that house. Later, while unpacking her few belongings in the small room assigned to her, Josephine heard a faint cough coming from the next room. She peeked down the hall and saw Mrs. Beatrice reclining in her bed, looking much more frail than she had in the drawing room. "Are you all right, ma'am? Can I bring you anything?" Josephine asked, entering cautiously. "Oh, my dear," Mrs. Beatrice's voice was just a whisper. "Since I fell ill, everything has changed in this house. Sometimes I think I'll never recover." Before she could continue, Christina appeared at the door, her face a mask of restrained irritation. "What are you doing in here?" Her tone was icy. "Did I not explain that I take care of my mother-in-law myself?" "Forgive me, ma'am. I heard a noise and came to check." "Next time, call me." Christina adjusted the pearl necklace at her throat with a nervous gesture. "Now I need to give Mrs. Beatrice her special tea." "Excuse me." As she left the room, Josephine couldn't help but notice the look of silent pleading that Mrs. Beatrice gave her. There was something deeply wrong in that house, and she was beginning to suspect that her arrival at the Ashworth mansion had not been merely a matter of luck or coincidence. In the kitchen, as Helena showed her where the utensils were kept, Josephine looked through the window at the immense garden where an elderly man tended to the plants with dedication. "That's Mr. Gerald, the gardener. He's been with the family for over 40 years, Helena commented, following Josephine's gaze. "He's one of the few who truly cares about Mrs. Beatrice. The others—" She paused as if she had said too much. "The others?" Josephine prompted. Helena sighed, lowering her voice. "I'll just say one thing. Watch this house carefully, Josephine. Not everything is as it seems. And be careful with Mrs. Christina. She may look like an angel to outsiders, but—" The rest of the sentence hung in the air, interrupted by the sound of the drawing-room bell. It was time for Mrs. Beatrice's tea, prepared exclusively by Christina. 2 weeks had passed since Josephine's arrival at the Ashworth mansion. In a short time, she had established a routine and gained the trust of most of the staff. Only Christina remained vigilant, watching the housekeeper's every move with eagle eyes. During this period, Josephine noted with growing concern the state of Mrs. Beatrice. The family matriarch, who had already seemed frail on the first day, was showing alarming signs of deterioration, visible weight loss, trembling hands, night sweats, and a pallor that made her skin look almost translucent. In the moments when Christina was not around, the elderly lady could barely get out of bed. "Helena, does Mrs. Beatrice have a medical diagnosis? Does she see a specialist?" Josephine asked discreetly, as they both folded sheets in the laundry room. The head housekeeper looked around, making sure they were alone. "Dr. Paul used to come every week, but it's been almost a month since Mrs. Christina dismissed his visits. She said she now consults a private doctor in London, a very renowned one." Helena paused significantly. "But curiously, I've never seen this supposed doctor here. And the prescriptions? Well, some don't seem to come from conventional pharmacies." That same afternoon, while cleaning Raphael's study, Josephine noticed an old photograph on the desk, the complete Ashworth family, with a much healthier and smiling Mrs. Beatrice at the center. Next to her late husband, an imposing man with grey hair. Raphael stood beside them, and Christina, already in the picture, seemed slightly out of place, as if she didn't yet fully belong to that family unit. They were a very close family before Mr. Augustus passed. Mr. Gerald's voice startled Josephine. The old gardener had entered silently to water the plants in the study. Mrs. Beatrice was the soul of this house, always cheerful, strong as an oak. Now, he shook his head sadly. "What happened to Mr. Augustus?" Josephine asked, sensing there was more to the story than met the eye. "It was very sudden." Mr. Gerald lowered his voice even further. "He was healthy, played tennis every morning. Then he started having symptoms similar to Mrs. Beatrice's now. The doctors talked about kidney failure, but—" He hesitated, I always found it strange. And after the funeral, Mrs. Christina took over a lot of control of the family business, even though it's officially Mr. Raphael who manages everything. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps in the corridor. Christina appeared at the door, her gaze shifting between Josephine and Mr. Gerald with suspicion. "Is there a problem here?" she asked, forcing a smile. "No, ma'am." "Just talking about the plants," replied Gerald, turning his attention back to the fern pot. That night, while the house slept, Josephine lay awake, reflecting on the details she had observed. Her instinct, sharpened by years of silent observation in the homes where she had worked, was sounding alarms she could not ignore. Around 3 a.m, a subtle noise jolted her from her thoughts. Light, almost imperceptible footsteps in the hallway. She cracked open her bedroom door and saw Christina gliding silently towards the kitchen, wearing a navy blue silk robe. Driven by a curiosity that outweighed her prudence, Josephine followed her, keeping a safe distance. In the kitchen, partially lit by the moonlight streaming through the windows, she watched Christina open a secret compartment at the back of a cupboard, from which she retrieved a small, carved wooden box and a turquoise teapot with silver details. With precise movements, Christina prepared a tea, adding herbs that Josephine couldn't identify. Then came the moment that confirmed her worst suspicions. From the wooden box, the daughter-in-law took out a small dark vial and, looking around to make sure she was alone, dripped a few drops of the liquid into the steaming beverage. Josephine retreated silently, her heart pounding. She returned to her room and pretended to be asleep when she heard Christina pass by in the hallway, now carrying a tray with the prepared tea. Strange, Josephine thought. Who would drink tea at this hour of the night? The next morning, Mrs. Beatrice did not come down for breakfast. Christina casually explained that her mother-in-law had had a restless night and needed to rest. When she was finally able to enter the matriarch's room to clean, Josephine found her in an even worse state, sweating coldly, with deep dark circles under her eyes and a constant tremor in her hands. "Mrs. Beatrice, are you all right?" Josephine asked, approaching with genuine concern. "The tea," the lady murmured with difficulty. "After the night tea I always get worse, but Christina insists it's part of the treatment." That same afternoon, while Christina was out to consult the specialist in London, Josephine took the opportunity to investigate the couple's bedroom. Hidden at the back of Christina's wardrobe, she found a book on toxic plants and their effects on the human body, with several pages marked. Suspicion was growing in her chest when the bedroom phone rang, startling her. After 3 rings, the answering machine picked up, and Josephine froze as she heard the voice leaving a message. "Chris, it's me. I'm worried about how long this is taking. The plan was for the old woman to have succumbed naturally by now. The longer we wait, the more risks we run. The lawyer already has all the documents ready to transfer ownership of the assets as soon as she... Call me when you get home. Love you." Josephine's blood ran cold. The voice was not Raphael's, but another man's. Christina had a lover, and together they were plotting something terrible against Mrs. Beatrice. Her suspicion turned to certainty when, in the kitchen, she seized a moment alone to examine the secret compartment she had seen Christina access. There was the turquoise teapot, and at the back, the dark vial. There was no label, only a disturbing symbol, a tiny skull engraved on the glass. Josephine discreetly photographed everything with her phone, including the vial, and closed the compartment exactly as she had found it. She needed help, but she didn't know who to trust in that house. Raphael seemed genuinely concerned about his mother, but he was always away, immersed in business. What if he was involved too? She decided she needed an ally outside the mansion. She remembered Martha, an old friend from her time working in London, now a nurse at a hospital in Bath. It was her only chance to find out what was really happening. The next day, on her afternoon off, Josephine met Martha at a discreet cafe in the city centre. She showed her the photos she had taken and recounted everything she had observed. "My God, Josephine, this is very serious." Martha examined the images in horror. "These symptoms you described, tremors, nausea, rapid weight loss, combined with this symbol on the vial, I think we might be dealing with some kind of systematic poisoning. I need a sample of this liquid to be sure," Martha continued. "But from what you describe, it sounds like your employer is being slowly poisoned. And the worst part is, It's being done in a way that mimics a natural illness. A chill ran down Josephine's spine. So what do I do? If I report it without proof, no one will believe me against a rich and powerful woman like Christina. We need the contents of that vial, Martha stated decisively. And in the meantime, you have to stop Mrs. Beatrice from consuming anything prepared by her daughter-in-law. Upon returning to the mansion, Josephine found a tense atmosphere. Christina was pacing the house nervously, and Raphael had come home early from work, a rare occurrence. From her window, Josephine watched the couple arguing intensely in the garden, with agitated gestures. My mother is getting worse every day, and this mysterious doctor in London doesn't seem to be helping. Raphael's voice was audible even from a distance. You don't understand medicine, darling, Christina replied in a falsely sweet tone that didn't match her tense expression. Trust me, I'm doing everything for her own good. As she watched them, Josephine felt the weight of responsibility on her shoulders. She was not just a housekeeper in that house. Now she was perhaps Mrs. Beatrice's only hope. The next morning, Josephine woke up determined to obtain a sample of the mysterious liquid. She knew she had to act with extreme caution. Any slip-up could not only cost her the job, but also endanger Mrs. Beatrice's life. The opportunity arose when Christina announced at breakfast that she needed to go to London again to consult Mrs. Beatrice's specialist. Raphael, visibly frustrated, insisted on accompanying her this time, but Christina was categorical. Darling, you know how anxious Mother gets when we're away for too long. It's better if you stay. Her tone was authoritarian, disguised as concern. Besides, those Chinese investors arrive tomorrow. You need to finalize the presentation. Reluctantly, Raphael agreed. Before leaving, Christina called Josephine aside and gave precise instructions. I've prepared Mrs. Beatrice's morning tea. It's on her bedside table. Make sure she drinks all of it, even if she complains about the taste. It's an essential part of the treatment. Yes, ma'am, Josephine replied, maintaining a neutral expression despite her internal revulsion. As soon as Christina left, Josephine rushed to Mrs. Beatrice's room. The matriarch was sleeping, her breathing shallow and irregular. Beside the bed, a steaming cup with a yellowish liquid exuded a peculiar odor, something between herbs and a chemical Josephine couldn't identify. Careful not to wake the elderly woman, Josephine took the cup to the bathroom. There she poured half of its contents into a small vial she had brought hidden in her apron pocket. She refilled the cup with water and placed it back on the bedside table. Mrs. Beatrice woke slowly, her unfocused eyes struggling to recognize her surroundings. Good morning, Mrs. Beatrice. Are you feeling better today? Josephine asked gently. Oh, Josephine, every day seems harder than the last, the lady murmured. Her fingers, once nimble on the piano that decorated the drawing room, now trembled uncontrollably. Sometimes I wonder if it wouldn't be better to just— Don't say that, ma'am, Josephine interrupted, sitting on the edge of the bed. You need to get stronger, and— Forgive my boldness, but I think you should drink less of this tea that Mrs. Christina prepares. Mrs. Beatrice looked at the cup with suspicion. She insists it's a special treatment, prescribed by the doctor. But after I drink it, I always feel worse. Her eyes filled with tears. Sometimes I think I'm going mad. How could my own daughter-in-law— You're not mad, Mrs. Beatrice, Josephine risked, lowering her voice even further. Trust me, I'm looking into this. Please, whenever you can, avoid drinking this tea. Throw it away when no one is looking. A glimmer of hope lit up the old woman's weary face. You believe me? I tried to talk to Raphael, but he thinks it's my old age that I'm confused. I believe you, and I promise I will find out the truth. That same afternoon, Josephine met again with Martha, her nurse friend, handing her the vial with the tea sample. I'll take this to the hospital lab. I have a toxicologist friend who can analyze it discreetly, Martha explained, her face etched with concern. In the meantime, keep preventing her from drinking that tea. Replace it with water, or a normal tea whenever possible. 3 days passed. Josephine implemented a discreet system to protect Mrs. Beatrice. She replaced Christina's teas with harmless versions whenever possible, ensured the elderly woman ate properly when her daughter-in-law wasn't looking, and encouraged her to drink plenty of plain water to help flush out any toxins. To her surprise, she began to notice small improvements in Mrs. Beatrice's condition. The tremors lessened slightly. Her lucidity increased and even a faint blush returned to her previously pale cheeks. Christina, on the other hand, grew increasingly agitated. Josephine caught her several times anxiously checking on her mother-in-law, her face contorted in a poorly disguised expression of frustration when she noticed the signs of improvement. "Strange," Christina commented to Raphael at dinner as Josephine served dessert. "The doctor said this phase of the treatment would cause more drowsiness and weakness, but your mother seems more alert. Isn't that a good thing?" Raphael questioned, confused. "Of course, darling," Christina quickly corrected herself, forcing a smile. "It's just unexpected." That night, Josephine's phone vibrated with a message from Martha. "Preliminary results urgent. Meet tomorrow. Same place." The cafe in the city center was nearly empty when Josephine arrived the next morning. Martha was already waiting, her grave face indicating the news was not good. "It's worse than we imagined, Joe," she said, sliding an envelope across the table. "My friend found traces of an arsenic-based compound, very similar to those used in some rat poisons. In small, regular doses, it causes exactly the symptoms you described: fatigue, tremors, gastrointestinal problems, weight loss, and the worst part, it perfectly mimics a natural organ failure, difficult to detect unless you're specifically looking for poisoning." Josephine felt the blood freeze in her veins. "So Christina is slowly poisoning her mother-in-law," Martha confirmed. "And from what you told me about the previous husband, it's possible this isn't the first time." "I need more proof," Josephine decided. "Something no one can deny. And I need to understand why. What does she gain from this?" "Money, probably," Martha suggested. "You said they're an extremely wealthy family." "Inheritance." "Maybe, but Mrs. Beatrice once mentioned that most of the assets are in a trust controlled by her, not Raphael." Back at the mansion, Josephine intensified her discreet surveillance. While cleaning Raphael's study, she found documents that began to clarify the puzzle. The will of the late Mr. Augustus Ashworth stipulated that the family fortune, including the historic mansion and various properties across the country, would pass entirely to Mrs. Beatrice and, upon her death, be divided between Raphael and several charities the family had supported for generations. Another, more recent document caught her eye: a real estate development proposal for the land where the mansion was located. Someone was planning to turn the historic property into a luxury condominium complex, a venture that would be worth millions. That same afternoon, while organizing Christina's wardrobe, Josephine found hidden among shoeboxes a folder with forged documents, a power of attorney in Mrs. Beatrice's name, giving Christina full authority to manage her assets, with a signature that looked forced, and a different will directing the entire inheritance to Raphael, and consequently to Christina as his wife. Josephine discreetly photographed all the documents. The plan was becoming clear. With Mrs. Beatrice out of the way, Christina would assume full control of the Ashworth fortune, possibly selling the historic mansion for the real estate development and pocketing millions. But one piece was still missing from the puzzle: the mysterious lover. Who was the man from the phone message? Was he involved in the scheme too? The answer came unexpectedly that night. Christina received a call during dinner, and claiming it was from her consulting doctor, excused herself to the garden. Josephine, who was serving dessert, noticed through the dining room window that her employer, away from the family's view, was behaving completely differently. Intimate gestures, low laughter, body language that left no doubt about the nature of the relationship. With an excuse to go to the kitchen, Josephine managed to get close enough to overhear part of the conversation. "Yes, it's taking longer than planned. Someone must be interfering with the process. No, he doesn't suspect a thing. He's still a blind fool. Soon we'll have everything, my love. The old woman won't last much longer. The contact at the development company already has the documents ready. Millions, you understand? And no one will ever know." A tall man approached through the side gate, hidden in the garden shadows. Christina looked around to make sure no one was watching and ran into his arms, kissing him passionately. Even in the dim light, Josephine recognized him. It was Paul Matthews, the doctor who had previously treated Mrs. Beatrice and whom Christina had dismissed, replacing him with the supposed specialist in London. The pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. The family's own doctor was involved in the scheme, likely falsifying reports and prescriptions to justify the treatment that was actually slowly poisoning Mrs. Beatrice. With her heart racing, Josephine retreated silently. She now had enough information to understand the plan, but she needed concrete proof that would convince Raphael and the authorities. She decided it was time for a bolder move. Under the pretext of cleaning Christina's room, Josephine discreetly installed the recording app on her own phone and hid it strategically among objects on the dressing table. Positioned to capture conversations in the room, it was risky but necessary. While waiting for the right moment to retrieve her phone, Josephine continued her mission to protect Mrs. Beatrice, replacing the poisoned teas and ensuring the elderly woman ate properly. With each passing day, she noticed small improvements in her condition, which only increased Christina's poorly disguised irritation. "I don't understand," Josephine heard Christina say on the phone one afternoon, hidden behind the library door. "The process should be irreversible at this stage, unless—" There was a significant pause. "Unless someone is interfering. I need to find out who." The tension in the Ashworth mansion mounted with each passing day. Josephine noticed that Christina was watching her with growing suspicion, following her movements around the house with predatory eyes. Mrs. Beatrice's gradual improvement was becoming more and more evident, a fact that clearly disturbed her daughter-in-law. "I'm feeling stronger today, Josephine," Mrs. Beatrice commented one afternoon when Christina was out. The elderly woman was sitting in her favorite armchair by the window, watching the garden with a renewed sparkle in her eyes. "I haven't felt like this in weeks. It's as if a fog is lifting from my mind." Josephine smiled, genuinely happy with the lady's recovery, but also apprehensive. "I'm so glad, Mrs. Beatrice, but remember our agreement. Don't mention this improvement to your daughter-in-law." "I'm no fool, my dear. I may be old, but I still know how to recognize when someone wishes me harm." Mrs. Beatrice took Josephine's hand with surprising firmness. "I know what Christina is doing. At first I thought it was my imagination, but now I'm sure. The problem is making my son see the truth." That same night, Josephine managed to retrieve her phone from Christina's room. Locked in her own room, her heart pounding, she connected the device to her small earphone and began listening to the recordings. Most of it consisted of mundane sounds: Christina getting ready, talking on the phone about trivial matters, arguing with the chambermaid about the organization of the closet. She was about to give up when she heard a conversation that made her blood run cold. "Paul, I'm worried. The old woman is getting better instead of worse. This shouldn't be happening." The male voice on the other end was clear. "Are you sure you're administering the correct dose? There can be no mistakes at this stage, Christina." "Of course I am. 3 drops in the tea twice a day as we agreed. But something is wrong. I think someone is interfering with the treatment. Who could it be? I have my suspicions. The new maid, perhaps. She seems too close to the old woman. Get rid of her, then. It's not that simple. Raphael seems to trust her, and he's already asking too many questions about his mother's treatment. If I fire her without cause, it will raise more suspicion. Christina, we don't have much time. The contract with the development company has a deadline. If we don't present the documents with Raphael's signature as the sole heir by the end of the month, we'll lose millions." "I know. Do you think I'm not under pressure? Everything was planned perfectly. Augustus was so much easier." The recording continued, revealing horrific details: the casual reference to the death of the family patriarch, evidence of forged documents, and plans to accelerate Mrs. Beatrice's poisoning. Josephine finally had the definitive proof of the crime. With trembling hands, she transferred the file to the spare memory card she kept hidden. She needed to show this to Raphael as soon as possible, but she would have to choose the moment carefully. The opportunity arose the next day. Christina announced at breakfast that she needed to go to London to consult the specialist again about Mrs. Beatrice's treatment. Raphael, lost in his own thoughts, just nodded distractedly. As soon as Christina left, Josephine sought out her employer in his study. She found him pensively contemplating a family photograph. "Excuse me, Mr. Raphael, may I speak with you about an important matter?" He looked up, seeming almost relieved by the interruption. "Of course, Josephine. What is it?" "It's about your mother, sir, and your wife." Josephine took a deep breath, gathering her courage. What I'm about to say will sound crazy, but I ask that you hear me out. For the next hour, Josephine meticulously laid out everything she had discovered. Mrs. Beatrice's suspicious symptoms, the mysterious tea, the hidden vial, the results of the toxicology analysis, the forged documents, the secret lover, and finally the incriminating recording. Raphael listened to it all in silence, his face shifting from initial disbelief to horror, and finally to a controlled fury. When Josephine finished, he remained quiet for several long minutes, processing the avalanche of information. "I know it's hard to believe, sir," Josephine said finally, breaking the heavy silence. "But I have all the proof here. And your mother has been improving since I started preventing her from drinking the tea prepared by Mrs. Christina. Actually, Josephine," Raphael finally spoke, his voice trembling with contained emotion, "it's not as hard to believe as you might think. For months I've noticed changes in Christina. Strange behaviors, secret calls, and my mother's mysterious illness." He ran a hand through his hair in a gesture of anguish. "Part of me always suspected something wasn't right, but I refused to face the possibility. Who wants to believe their own wife is capable of something so monstrous?" "So you believe me?" "I do. And we're going to act immediately." Raphael stood up, determined. "First, we'll ensure my mother's safety. Then we need a plan to confront Christina with this evidence." In the following hours, Raphael discreetly called his trusted lawyer, Mr. Maurice Sampson, who arrived at the mansion in less than an hour. Together they listened to the recording and examined the other evidence collected by Josephine. "This is extremely serious," the lawyer concluded. "We have enough evidence for a search warrant and possibly for a pre-trial detention, but we must proceed with caution. Your wife comes from an influential family with powerful connections. They devised a careful plan. Mr. Sampson would contact the police and the public prosecutor's office, while Raphael would confront Christina upon her return, secretly recording the conversation to obtain any additional confessions. Josephine would stay with Mrs. Beatrice, ensuring her safety. What no one expected, however, was that Christina would return earlier than anticipated. When the front door opened late that same afternoon, Raphael and the lawyer were still in the study, finalizing the legal preparations. Josephine, who was tidying Mrs. Beatrice's room, heard Christina's voice downstairs and ran to alert Raphael. In the hallway, she unexpectedly ran into her employer, who was coming up the stairs with determined steps. "What are you doing here?" Christina asked, her tone accusatory. "Shouldn't you be cleaning the dining room at this hour?" "I was just checking if Mrs. Beatrice needed anything, ma'am," Josephine replied, trying to maintain her composure. Christina's eyes narrowed. "You've been spending a lot of time with my mother-in-law lately, haven't you? Have you been interfering with her treatment?" Before Josephine could answer, Raphael appeared at the top of the stairs, his face a mask of contained fury. "Christina, we need to talk. Now." Something in her husband's voice made Christina recoil slightly. "Darling, I've just arrived. Can we talk after dinner?" "No, now." Raphael pointed to the study where the lawyer was waiting. Christina hesitated, her eyes flicking from Raphael to Josephine, as if trying to assess what was happening. Finally, with an exasperated sigh, she headed to the study. Josephine remained in the hallway, her heart pounding. The confrontation she had so dreaded was about to happen. Through the crack in the door, she could partially see inside the study. Raphael standing by the window. Christina sitting rigidly in an armchair, the lawyer with a grave expression beside the desk. "Christina," Raphael began, his voice controlled but icy, "I know what you've been doing to my mother." The woman blinked, momentarily destabilized, but quickly regained her composure. "What are you talking about, darling?" "I've been taking care of her with all the love and—" "Enough lies." Raphael slammed his fist on the table, making her jump. "We have proof, Christina. We know about the poison in the tea, about the forged documents, about your plans with Paul to sell the mansion to the developers." Christina's face turned visibly pale, but she still tried to maintain her facade. "This is absurd. Who put these ridiculous ideas in your head? Was it that meddling maid, wasn't it?" Raphael, without answering, played part of the recording on the computer. Christina's voice filled the room. "Augustus was so much easier. This time we need to make sure there are no suspicions." The silence that followed was almost palpable. Christina looked like a statue, her face a mixture of shock and calculation, as if rapidly weighing her options. When she finally spoke, her voice had changed completely, cold, hard, without any pretense of affection. "You don't understand anything, Raphael. Your family is sitting on a fortune they've kept locked away for generations. All that money, all those properties, wasted. I just wanted to unlock that potential. By trying to kill my mother, like you killed my father." Raphael's voice trembled with rage. The smile that formed on Christina's lips sent shivers down Josephine's spine. It was a smile devoid of any humanity. "Your father was a casualty. The original plan was just the old woman, but he started asking too many questions." The lawyer spoke for the first time. "Mrs. Ashworth, I must advise you that this conversation is being recorded and may be used as evidence. I suggest you await the arrival of the authorities in silence." Christina's face contorted into an expression of hatred. "Authorities? You called the police?" Her gaze turned to Raphael accusingly. "You chose that old woman and some common maid over your own wife?" "I chose the truth, Christina, and justice." With a sudden movement, Christina stood up and lunged towards the door. Josephine, startled, took a few steps back but had no time to hide. When Christina saw her in the hallway, her eyes narrowed dangerously. "You," she hissed, advancing towards her. "You ruined everything." Raphael and the lawyer rushed out of the study, but not in time to stop Christina from grabbing Josephine's arm with surprising strength. "This isn't over," Christina whispered in Josephine's ear before Raphael managed to pull them apart. "I have resources you can't even imagine." At that moment, sirens could be heard approaching the mansion. Christina's face transformed into a mask of panic. The sirens grew louder as they approached the Ashworth mansion, shattering the usual silence of the tree-lined street. Christina, realizing she was cornered, shot one last look of hatred at Josephine and Raphael before bolting towards the back stairs. "She's going to escape!" Josephine shouted. Raphael and the lawyer ran after Christina, while Josephine rushed to Mrs. Beatrice's room to ensure her safety. She found the elderly woman sitting in her armchair by the window, watching with a confused expression as police cars began to arrive. "What's happening, Josephine?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You're safe now, Mrs. Beatrice." Josephine held her hands gently. "The truth is coming out." Downstairs, chaos had erupted. Christina had managed to reach the back door, only to find Mr. Gerald blocking her path. The old gardener, despite his advanced age, stood firm before the desperate woman. "Get out of my way, you old fool." Christina tried to push him, but Gerald didn't budge. "No, ma'am. I've seen a lot in this house. I saw Mr. Augustus waste away for no reason. I saw Mrs. Beatrice, always so strong, turn into a shadow. And now I know why." His calm voice contrasted with Christina's agitation. "It's over." When Raphael and the lawyer arrived, they found Christina cornered, her wild eyes frantically searching for an escape route. Outside, police officers were already surrounding the property. Detective Inspector Mills, a tall middle-aged man with a stern expression, entered accompanied by two investigators. "Mrs. Christina Ashworth?" he asked, showing his badge. "We have a warrant for your arrest for attempted murder, forgery, and fraud." "This is absurd," Christina screamed, her mask of composure completely shattered. "Raphael, you can't let them do this. I'm your wife." Raphael, pale but resolute, stood beside the detective. "The only thing you've been in this house is a threat, Christina. A threat I couldn't see because I was blinded by love. Or perhaps by naivety." As the officers moved to handcuff her, Christina made one last desperate move. She tore a pendant she always wore from her neck and tried to bring it to her mouth. One of the investigators was faster, grabbing her wrist and causing the small object to fall to the floor. A metal capsule that, when opened by forensics, was found to contain a white powder. "Poison," the expert confirmed after a quick test. "Likely cyanide by the look of it." Christina, defeated and in handcuffs, was led out of the mansion under the astonished gazes of the few staff members gathered in the hall. Before getting into the police car, she cast one last look at the house, a mixture of hatred and despair in her eyes. In the hours that followed, the Ashworth mansion was transformed into a crime scene. Forensics teams searched Christina's rooms, finding more evidence: the vial of poison hidden in the secret kitchen compartment, forged documents, a notebook with detailed notes on dosages and expected effects at different time intervals. On Christina's phone, investigators discovered messages exchanged with Paul Matthews, the doctor and lover, detailing the gradual poisoning plan and discussing the best way to simulate a natural illness. There were also communications with a representative of the real estate development company negotiating the future sale of the property for an exorbitant sum. Paul Matthews was arrested at his office that same evening. On his computer, the police found falsified records of Mrs. Beatrice's health and, more incriminatingly, similar records pertaining to the last months of Mr. Augustus Ashworth's life. Josephine stayed by Mrs. Beatrice's side throughout the ordeal, shielding her from the commotion. The elderly woman, though shaken by the events, showed surprising inner strength. "I always knew there was something wrong with that woman," she confided to Josephine as they watched the police cars leave the property from the window. "Augustus began to suspect something shortly before he fell ill. He told me he'd found inconsistencies in the company's accounts, modified documents. I thought it was just his paranoia, until I started feeling the same symptoms after he was gone." "Why did you never tell your son?" Mrs. Beatrice sighed deeply. "Raphael was so in love. And Christina knew exactly how to manipulate him, how to drive a wedge between us. By the time I finally tried to speak up, I was too weak to be convincing. He thought my aging mind was playing tricks on me." Tears welled in her eyes. "My greatest fear was leaving this world without protecting my son from that viper." 2 days later, Raphael gathered all the staff in the main drawing room. His face showed the weight of recent events, but there was also a palpable relief, as if a great burden had been lifted from his shoulders. "As you all know, my wife, ex-wife," he corrected himself, "is in custody, accused of serious crimes against my family." His voice was firm despite the contained emotion. "I want to thank all of you who remained loyal to this house during this difficult time. Especially you, Josephine." His eyes met the housekeeper's with sincere gratitude. "Without your courage and insight, my mother would not be here today." Mrs. Beatrice, seated in her favorite armchair, seemed stronger with each passing day. The medical examiner who had examined her confirmed what Josephine already knew. She had been systematically poisoned with an arsenic-based compound, administered in small doses to simulate a natural degenerative disease. "The good news," Raphael continued, "is that with the end of the poison's administration and the proper treatment, the doctors expect an almost complete recovery of my mother's health." The following weeks brought a gradual transformation to the Ashworth mansion. The somber, tense atmosphere gave way to a lighter one. Mrs. Beatrice, free from Christina's toxic influence, both literally and figuratively, blossomed again. Her mind regained its clarity, her body regained its strength, and her spirit began to show the vitality that had always characterized her. Josephine, for her part, found herself in an unexpected position. From a simple housekeeper, she had become a central figure in the recovery of the house and the family. Raphael, recognizing her loyalty and integrity, offered her the position of head housekeeper with a substantially higher salary and expanded responsibilities. Even more surprising was the deep friendship that developed between her and Mrs. Beatrice. The two women, from such different worlds, found in each other a genuine connection, forged in the extraordinary circumstances they had faced together. "You saved me, Josephine," Mrs. Beatrice told her one afternoon as they walked through the garden. Spring had arrived, bringing new colors to the rose bushes the elderly woman so loved. "Not just from physical death, but from something worse. Leaving this world believing I was mad, that my fears were just the fantasies of an aging mind. I only did what any decent person would do, Mrs. Beatrice." "No, my dear. You did what few would have the courage to do. You risked your job, perhaps even your safety, to defend someone you barely knew. That is not common, believe me." The trial of Christina and Paul began 3 months after their arrest. The case, involving a traditional and wealthy family from Bath, attracted considerable media attention. Journalists camped daily at the mansion gates, hoping for statements or glimpses of those involved. Raphael, Josephine, and Mrs. Beatrice were called to testify. For Josephine, it was an intimidating experience. She had never been in a courtroom before, let alone as a key witness in such a notorious case. "Just tell the truth, exactly as it happened," Mr. Sampson advised her on the morning of her testimony. "Your honesty is your greatest strength." The courtroom was packed when Josephine entered. At the defense table, Christina looked like a shadow of the elegant, controlling woman who had once dominated the Ashworth mansion. Her face was pale, her eyes ringed with dark circles, her once impeccable hair now dull. Beside her, Paul Matthews looked equally defeated. For 4 hours, Josephine meticulously recounted her observations, discoveries, and actions. Her voice, initially hesitant, gained firmness as she described the systematic manipulation perpetrated by Christina and her accomplice. The recordings, toxicology reports, and forged documents were presented as evidence. The most impactful moment came when the prosecutor played the recording in which Christina casually discussed Mr. Augustus's death and her plans for Mrs. Beatrice with Paul. A murmur of horror rippled through the courtroom. Christina, who until then had maintained a facade of wronged indignation, finally broke down in the face of the irrefutable evidence. In a moment of uncontrolled fury, she stood up and shouted, "You don't understand anything!" That family was sitting on a fortune they refused to enjoy. All that money wasted on useless charities, on maintaining an old house that should have been sold decades ago. I just wanted to unlock that potential. Her lawyer desperately tried to silence her, but it was too late. Christina's words, captured by the cameras broadcasting the trial, sealed her fate. That night back at the mansion, a contemplative silence hung over the family gathered in the drawing room. Raphael, sitting at the long-closed piano, softly played a melancholic melody. Mrs. Beatrice, in her armchair by the window, watched the full moon illuminate the garden. And Josephine, who should have been serving tea, found herself comfortably settled on the sofa, her posture revealing the transformation of her role in that house. "Do you know what's saddest about all this?" Mrs. Beatrice reflected, breaking the silence. Christina never needed to resort to such methods. If she had truly wanted to modernize the family business, to invest differently, I would have listened. I've always been open to new ideas. Augustus was too, but she chose the darkest path. "Some people confuse ambition with greed," Raphael commented, his fingers still dancing lightly over the piano keys. "And when greed takes over, any justification seems valid." Josephine watched the interaction between mother and son, marveling at the transformation in both of them. Freed from Christina's manipulative influence, they had rediscovered the genuine connection that had always existed between them. What none of them could have imagined was that this night would mark the beginning of a new chapter in the history of the Ashworth family and in Josephine's life, more extraordinary than any of them could have anticipated. 6 months had passed since the trial that shook Bath society. The verdict had been unanimous. Christina Ashworth and Paul Matthews were found guilty on all charges. The evidence was irrefutable. The confessions, devastating. The sentence, 38 years in prison for Christina and 22 for Paul, with no chance of significant appeal. The exhumation of Augustus Ashworth's body, ordered by the court, confirmed what they already suspected. High levels of arsenic in his tissues, proving that his premature death had not been from natural causes. Another victim was identified during the investigation, an elderly lady in London, for whom Christina had worked as a companion years before, also with traces of the same poison in her remains, a criminal pattern that extended beyond the Ashworth mansion. It seems she had been perfecting her technique over the years. Detective Inspector Mills commented on his last visit to the mansion, leafing through the case file. She started with vulnerable elderly people, without close family, then moved on to bigger targets. If it weren't for you, Josephine, this pattern would have continued. The case gained national notoriety. Newspapers across the UK ran headlines about the Bath poisoner, and weekly magazines dedicated special features to exploring Christina's dark past, revealing a history of manipulation and fraud dating back to her youth. In the face of media exposure, other families who had employed Christina in the past came forward, reporting suspicious behavior and unexplained losses. Life at the historic property, however, was moving towards renewal. Mrs. Beatrice, almost fully recovered, had resumed her prominent role in managing the family business, bringing her accumulated wisdom back to the center of decisions. Under her guidance, the Ashworth Foundation, which had operated discreetly for years, gained new momentum, expanding its social and educational projects in the region. Augustus always believed our fortune should serve a greater purpose. Mrs. Beatrice explained during a meeting with Raphael and the Foundation's administrators. Now more than ever, I feel the responsibility to honor that vision. Raphael, free from Christina's manipulative control, was rediscovering his true calling in the social projects the family had always supported. His background in environmental engineering, previously sidelined by the real estate ventures Christina had insisted on prioritizing, now found expression in initiatives for the preservation of Bath's historical and natural heritage. One afternoon, while reviewing restoration plans for an old country estate that was to be converted into a cultural center, Raphael made a surprising discovery. Among the property's old documents, he found correspondence from his great-grandfather with 19th-century abolitionists. The Ashworth family, long before the official abolition, had already been implementing measures to gradually free their indentured servants and offer them education and land. "It's as if the past is sending us a message," he commented to Josephine, showing her the time-yellowed letters. "Our commitment to social justice didn't start now. It's in the family's DNA." And Josephine had found herself in a position she had never imagined. She was no longer just the head housekeeper, but a respected advisor, almost an extension of the family. Mrs. Beatrice had insisted she move into one of the main floor bedrooms, leaving the staff quarters at the back of the house. "After what you did for us, Josephine, I can no longer see you as an ordinary employee," the matriarch declared one sunny morning as they had coffee on the veranda. "You are part of this family now." Josephine's adjustment to her new reality was not immediate. For weeks, she would wake up at 5 in the morning out of habit, preparing to start her domestic chores only to remember that her role had changed. Sometimes she would find herself distractedly polishing the silverware or arranging flowers, tasks that were now the responsibility of other staff members. "Old habits die hard," she confessed to Helena, the former head housekeeper, who now treated her with a mixture of respect and awe. "I spend so much time serving that I don't know how to be served." "You've earned this change," Helena replied, finally overcoming her initial reservation. "There was always something different about you, Josephine." Her dignity that not even a housekeeper's uniform could hide. Josephine accepted the change with a mix of gratitude and discomfort. Even after months in her new position, she was still surprised to sit at the dinner table as an equal, to be consulted on important decisions, to have her opinion not just heard but valued. One evening, after a dinner with local business leaders interested in supporting the Foundation's projects, Raphael found Josephine in the library, engrossed in a book on non-profit management. "Studying so late?" he asked, sitting in the armchair beside her. "I want to better understand how these projects work," she replied, closing the book. "If I'm going to be a part of this, I need to contribute for real. Not just because she hesitated, unsure how to define her position in that house. "Because you're someone special to the family?" Raphael completed gently. "Yes, I don't want people to think I'm here just out of charity or gratitude." Raphael studied her for a moment, admiring her determination. "You know, when I met Christina, I was dazzled by her formal education, her international degrees, her fluency in languages. I thought that represented intelligence and worth. What a fool I was." He smiled, a smile tinged with melancholy. "You, with your practical wisdom and unwavering integrity, have more to offer than any diploma hanging on a wall." It was a Sunday afternoon when Raphael invited her for a walk in the gardens. Autumn had arrived in Bath, painting the leaves in shades of gold and red. They walked in silence for some time, until they reached the small ornamental lake at the back of the property. "Do you like being here, Josephine?" he asked suddenly, his gaze fixed on the calm surface of the water. "Of course. The mansion is beautiful, and your mother has been very generous to me." "I don't mean the mansion. I mean being here with me." Josephine's heart quickened. In recent weeks, she had noticed subtle changes in the way Raphael treated her. Glances that lingered a little longer, smiles that seemed reserved just for her, conversations that stretched late into the night. "Mr. Raphael, just Raphael." "Please," he interrupted gently, turning to face her. "After everything we've been through together, I think we can drop the formalities, don't you? Josephine nodded, unable to find the words. Raphael took her hands in his eyes reflecting an emotion she had never seen before. I know this might sound crazy. We come from different worlds with different stories. But over the past few months, I've realized something that was perhaps there from the beginning, just waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. He paused, as if gathering courage. I'm in love with you, Josephine. Not for the position you hold, not out of gratitude for what you did, but for the extraordinary woman you are. The world seemed to stand still for a moment. In her 43 years of life, 25 of them serving in other people's homes, Josephine had never imagined hearing such words, especially from someone like Raphael Ashworth, a man educated at the finest institutions, heir to a considerable fortune, a part of Bath's high society. This can't work, she murmured, though her heart screamed the opposite. What would people say? The housekeeper and the master of the house. Let them talk, he replied with conviction. If I've learned anything from this whole tragedy, it's to recognize what truly matters. And you, Josephine Stewart, matter more to me than any social convention, more than any outside opinion. That afternoon, sitting by the lake under the orange twilight sky, Raphael and Josephine shared their first kiss, hesitant, sweet and full of promise. Mrs. Beatrice, far from opposing the relationship as many expected, received the news with a smile of genuine approval. I already knew, she confessed to Josephine the first chance they had alone. I saw something in my son's eyes that wasn't there before, a light that you brought back. Don't you find it strange? Does it not bother you that your son is involved with someone like me? The matriarch held Josephine's hands with a firmness surprising for her age. My dear, I learned the hard way that titles, social positions, and appearances mean nothing. Christina had everything society values: beauty, formal education, a family name, and yet she turned out to be a monster. You, with your integrity, courage, and genuine kindness, are exactly the kind of person I always wished to see beside my son. The relationship blossomed in the following months, to the surprise of many in Bath society. There were, of course, malicious comments, disapproving looks, even some old friends who distanced themselves, unable to accept the breach of social conventions. The Wednesday tea circle, a traditional gathering of local high society ladies, became a stage for venomous remarks. Of course she planned it all, said Carmen Vanderbilt, an industrialist's wife and an old family friend. First she gets the wife out of the way with these absurd accusations, then she ingratiates herself with the son and the mother. A clever gold digger, that's what she is. Others, however, defended the couple. Have you seen the way she looks at him? Argued Eliza Montgomery, a young artist whose parents were part of the Ashworth social circle. There's no calculation there, just genuine love. And after everything Raphael went through with Christina, he deserves someone who truly loves him. One evening, during a charity gala at the Assembly Rooms, one of Bath's architectural jewels, the couple faced their first significant public confrontation. Marina Avery, a socialite known for her sharp tongue, approached them during the cocktail reception. Raphael, darling, how are you? Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Turning to Josephine, she added with false sweetness, and you must be the new friend of the family. So brave of you to appear at events like this. It must be so different from what you're used to. Before Raphael could intervene, Josephine replied with surprising serenity, It is different, Mrs. Avery. I spent years observing these events from behind the scenes, serving people like you. The biggest difference I notice is that from this side, some people seem far less gracious than they appear when they're being served. Marina turned pale, while a few nearby guests tried to stifle their smiles. Raphael, after a moment of surprise, held Josephine's hand with evident pride. For every person who pulled away, another drew closer, recognizing the authenticity of this unexpected love. The Montgomerys, a family of artists and intellectuals, became close friends. Edward Santos, an old university friend of Raphael's who had always disapproved of Christina, declared himself charmed by Josephine. She has a refreshing authenticity, he commented to Raphael. No pretense, no manipulation. Just a crystal-clear honesty that is rare in our circles. On a rainy June afternoon, Raphael took Josephine to the orchid greenhouse at the back of the garden, a special place for both of them, where many of their deepest conversations had taken place. There, surrounded by rare flowers and the comforting sound of rain on the glass roof, he knelt and presented a delicate ring with a blue sapphire. "Marry me, Josephine?" The news of the engagement between the Ashworth heir and the former housekeeper caused exactly the stir one would expect. Local newspapers reported the event, some gossip magazines speculated on details, and social media buzzed with divided opinions. "It's like a modern fairy tale," commented Martha, Josephine's nurse friend, during one of her visits, "from the kitchen to the altar. But you deserve it, Joe. You've always had a heart of gold." The ceremony, held 2 months later, was intimate and elegant. Only close friends and family gathered in the mansion's garden, decorated with white and blue flowers. Josephine, radiant in a champagne silk dress, walked to the makeshift altar under an arch of jasmine, escorted by Mr. Gerald, who had proudly taken on the role of a father figure. Mrs. Beatrice, sitting in the front row with tears of happiness in her eyes, perfectly represented the transformation of that family, where once there was manipulation and deceit, now honesty and true love flourished. During the reception, Raphael led the guests to an area of the garden that had been specially prepared for the occasion. There, a new building attached to the historic mansion was being inaugurated, the Beatrice Ashworth Welcome Center for Women in Vulnerable Situations. "This project was born from the ashes of our own family tragedy," Raphael explained, his voice thick with emotion. "A place where women facing violence, abuse, and at-risk situations will find not only temporary shelter, but also professional training, legal and psychological support, and a real chance to rebuild their lives." Josephine. Now Josephine Ashworth Stewart took the floor, her voice firm despite her emotion. "As someone who spent a large part of her life working behind the scenes, I know how difficult it is for women in vulnerable positions to make their voices heard. This center is our commitment to all those who need a fresh start, a second chance." Above the main entrance of the new building, a special symbol had been carved in wood and metal, a stylized turquoise teapot, the same one that once carried poison, now transformed into an emblem of overcoming and hope. The center began its activities the week after the wedding. The first residents were 3 women referred by the local social services department. Martha, 35, with 2 small children fleeing a violent husband. Louise, 22, 7 months pregnant, abandoned by her family after reporting abuse by her stepfather. And Mrs. Eleanor, 68, who had lost everything after being scammed by her own nephew. Josephine dedicated herself personally to following each case, often staying late at the center's office, developing individualized recovery plans. "You identify with them, don't you?" Raphael asked one night, finding her absorbed in reports long after office hours. "With all of them in some way," Josephine confirmed. "Each one has a piece of my story, the vulnerability, the feeling of invisibility, the fear of the future. The difference is that I got a chance that many don't. And now you're creating that chance for others." Exactly. It's like a cycle coming full circle. In the following years, the Beatrice Ashworth Center grew beyond initial expectations. More than 150 women passed through its programs, many of them achieving financial independence, regaining custody of their children, and rebuilding lives that had seemed hopelessly broken. Among the most impactful cases was that of Caroline, a 19-year-old who arrived at the center illiterate after years of domestic exploitation in a family home in London. At the center, it was discovered she had a natural talent for visual arts. With the team's support, Caroline not only learned to read and write but also developed her artistic skills, eventually securing a scholarship to a renowned art school. "You showed me that I wasn't just a maid, that my worth was far beyond the work I did," she told Josephine at her graduation exhibition, where her abstract canvases, representing the journey of female liberation, received critical acclaim. Josephine, once invisible to society, became a respected figure not only in Bath but throughout the country. Her story, from the housekeeper who unmasked a criminal plot to the director of one of the most successful women's shelters in the nation, inspired other women to believe in their own worth. She was invited to give lectures at universities, participate in television programs on women's rights, and even join a county council on public policies for women in vulnerable situations. "I never imagined my voice could carry any weight," she confessed to Mrs. Beatrice, after returning from a national conference on domestic violence in London. "I grew up believing that people like me should remain invisible, do their work in silence, never cause a fuss. And look at you now," the matriarch replied with evident pride, "causing a fuss with exactly the people who need to be fussed about." Raphael, for his part, completely redirected the Ashworth family business. The properties that Christina had once planned to sell for luxury developments were transformed into community spaces, technical schools, and small business incubators. The fortune accumulated over generations finally served the purpose Mrs. Beatrice had always desired, to improve the lives of those who truly needed it. Under his management, the Ashworth Foundation expanded to other cities in the region, always with the same guiding principle: empowering people in vulnerable situations to achieve economic autonomy and dignity. The historic mansion, which Christina had so desperately wanted to convert into a luxury condominium, was transformed into a cultural and educational complex. The main floor still served as the family's residence, but the spacious ground floor rooms were adapted to house a community library, a small museum on the region's history, and rooms for free workshops and courses. "Augustus would be so proud," Mrs. Beatrice commented at the cultural space's inauguration, watching dozens of children from local state schools enthusiastically exploring the family's historical collection. "He always said our fortune was a loan from history, that it should return to the community that made it possible." On a special afternoon, 5 years after the wedding, the family gathered for an intimate celebration. Mrs. Beatrice, now 85 but still lucid and energetic, was playing with her first great-granddaughter, Antonia, 3 years old, the daughter of Raphael and Josephine. The little girl with curly hair and bright eyes ran through the same garden where, years before, a dark drama had nearly destroyed that family. At first, Josephine had feared motherhood, worried that her age of 45 might complicate the pregnancy. But to everyone's surprise, especially the doctors, the pregnancy had proceeded without any complications. Antonia was born healthy and vigorous, bringing a new dimension of joy to the Ashworth mansion. The girl was growing up to reveal a fascinating personality. Josephine's sweetness and empathy, combined with Raphael's determination and restless intellect. At 3, she already showed an insatiable curiosity about the world around her and a special connection with Mrs. Beatrice, following her great-grandmother like a little shadow to every corner of the mansion. "It's as if the circle is complete," Raphael observed, watching his daughter sit on her great-grandmother's lap, listening intently to the family stories the elderly woman loved to tell. A new generation, growing up in an environment of love and respect, without the secrets and manipulations of the past. "Sometimes I look back and hardly recognize my life," Josephine confided to her mother-in-law, as they watched little Antonia chasing butterflies. "From my parents' house in the Somerset countryside to working in mansions as a maid, and now this." Mrs. Beatrice smiled wisely. "Do you know what I've learned, my dear? That the true worth of people is never in titles, positions, or bank balances. It's in character, in courage in the face of adversity, in the ability to do good even when it would be easier to look the other way." Raphael approached, carrying a tray with 3 cups of tea. The aroma of lemon balm and chamomile filled the sunny afternoon air. "A toast," he proposed, raising his cup, "to new beginnings. And to the courage of an extraordinary woman who taught us that a person's worth lies in their heart." Josephine smiled, raising her own cup. Across the garden, Antonia had stopped her running to watch a blue butterfly that had landed on a flower. The girl gently extended her hand, and to everyone's surprise, the butterfly landed on her tiny fingers for a magical moment before taking flight again. "She has your spirit," Mrs. Beatrice commented, her eyes shining with emotion. Gentle yet fearless. Late that afternoon, as the shadows lengthened across the garden, Mr. Gerald approached the group with a bouquet of fresh roses picked from the greenhouse. The old gardener, now nearly 80, remained dedicated to caring for the plants, though he had the help of younger assistants for the heavier tasks. "For you, ma'am," he said, handing the flowers to Josephine with a respectful bow. "The first from the new rosebush we planted last autumn." "They're beautiful, Mr. Gerald." Josephine accepted the bouquet, deeply touched by the gesture. "As perfect as the ones you gave me on my first day of work here, remember?" when I was so nervous I could barely hold my suitcase. I remember it like it was yesterday, the old gardener smiled. And you arrived with frightened eyes, but you had a firmness in your step that caught my attention. I thought to myself, this one has inner strength. You always saw more in me than I could see in myself. Mr. Gerald. I only recognized what was already there. Mrs. Josephine. The way the old gardener naturally used Mrs. before her name, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect, still moved her. It was a reminder of how her life had changed, of how she herself had changed, without losing the essence that had brought her here. In that perfect moment, with her family gathered under the autumn sun, Josephine felt a deep certainty. Life's paths, however unlikely and winding they may seem, eventually lead us exactly where we need to be. From the small house in the Somerset countryside to the imposing mansion in Bath, her journey had been extraordinary. But the most important thing was not the destination. It was the transformation that had occurred in her heart, the discovery of a strength that had always been there, just waiting for the opportunity to manifest. The turquoise teapot, now a symbol of hope at the Welcome Center, was the perfect reminder. Even from the objects most associated with destruction, redemption can be born. Even from the darkest stories, light can emerge. And as the sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, the old Ashworth mansion, once a stage for secrets and betrayals, breathed anew, blessed by the transformative power of truth, courage, and authentic love. End of story, dear listeners. We hope the story of Josephine and Raphael has touched your hearts, showing that the courage to stand up for the truth can transform not just one life, but many. To continue experiencing emotions like this, we have a special playlist with other inspiring stories of overcoming adversity and finding true love. You can find it by clicking the link beside this video. If this narrative about worth, integrity, and second chances resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Every day we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity of human relationships and the beauty of new beginnings. We'll see you in the next story.